Welcome to the Book Reading and Summaries channel.
Ulysses by James Joyce. James Joyce's Ulysses, 1922, is one of the most influential and ambitious novels of the 20th century. Set entirely on a single day, June 16, 1904, in Dublin, Ireland, the novel reimagines Homer's Odyssey through the wanderings of three central characters, Leopold Bloom, Stephen Dedalus, and Molly Bloom. Joyce's novel combines interior monologue, experimental narrative styles, mythic parallels, city realism, philosophical reflection, and intimate psychological exploration. What follows is a detailed, continuous 5,000-word summary that captures the key events, structure, themes, and psychological dynamics of all 18 episodes. Introduction, structure and themes. Ulysses is divided into three major parts that parallel the journeys of Homeric heroes. Part 1, the Telemachus, episodes 1-3. Focusing on Stephen Dedalus, a young, intellectually gifted but emotionally troubled teacher and aspiring writer. He is the novel's version of Telemachus, searching for a father. Part 2, the Odyssey, episodes 4-15. Centered on Leopold Bloom, a Jewish-Irish advertising canvasser and the modern Odysseus, wandering through Dublin while wrestling with loneliness, marital betrayal, and existential longing. Part 3, Nostos, Homecoming, episodes 16-18. Bloom returns home at night, shares a symbolic father-son moment with Stephen, and the novel concludes with Molly Bloom's famous soliloquy. Across these episodes, Joyce experiments with narrative form, shifting between traditional realism, dramatic script, newspaper headlines, symbolic allegory, parodies of English prose style, scientific catalogues, dream hallucinations, and stream of consciousness monologues. Part 1, the Telemachus, Episode 1, Telemachus. The novel begins at the Martello Tower in Sandy Cove, just south of Dublin. Stephen Dedalus lives there with two companions. Buck Mulligan, a charismatic, mocking medical student. Haynes, an Englishman studying Irish culture. Mulligan begins the morning by parodying a Catholic mass, immediately irritating Stephen, who still grieves the recent death of his mother. Stephen's guilt is heightened by Mulligan's taunts about Stephen refusing to pray at her bedside. During breakfast, Haynes rambles about Irish history and nationalism, annoying Stephen further. The dynamic in the tower is marked by tension. Mulligan dominates socially and economically, treating Stephen like a subservient intellectual. Stephen senses he is being taken advantage of. A key emotional revelation emerges. Mulligan plans to rent the tower without including Stephen, cementing Stephen's feeling of homelessness. As they walk toward the sea, Mulligan demands the key to the tower. Stephen gives it but decides he will not return. His act symbolizes emotional exile and the beginning of his wandering, mirroring Telemachus leaving home to search for identity. Episode 2, Nestor. Stephen heads to his job teaching history at Mr. Deasy's school in Dalkey. He teaches a lesson on Pyrrhus and the classical world, though the boy's inattention reflects Stephen's internal lack of direction and authority. After class, Stephen meets Mr. Deasy, the headmaster, an opinionated, self-satisfied unionist. Deasy lectures Stephen about money, morality, and the superiority of English order over Irish chaos. He also makes anti-Semitic comments, foreshadowing Bloom's later experiences. Deasy asks Stephen to deliver a letter to a newspaper about cattle disease, which Stephen agrees to, though ironically he knows the editors are unlikely to print such material. Walking away from the school, Stephen contemplates the weight of history and memory, reflecting that history is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. Episode 3, Proteus. This episode is a rich, dense stream of consciousness monologue. Stephen walks along Sandymount Strand, attempting to grapple with his own thoughts and sensory impressions. Themes include epistemology, how do we know what we know? His artistic ambitions. His guilt over his mother's death. Memories from Paris. His ambiguous feelings toward his family. The episode is dreamlike and symbolic. Stephen tries to shape his mental chaos into art, but he remains paralyzed by doubt. As Proteus changes shape, so do Stephen's thoughts. His wanderings mirror Telemachus's early journey, restless, uncertain, searching for meaning. Part 2, The Odyssey Episode 4, Calypso. Now the narrative shifts to Leopold Bloom, introducing him through domestic realism. Bloom prepares breakfast for his wife Molly and their cat. He goes out to buy a kidney and reflects on everyday sensations with vivid sensory detail. Bloom is gentle, empathetic, and curious, a contrast to Stephen's melancholy intellectualism. Yet Bloom carries emotional wounds. He knows Molly is planning an afternoon affair with Blazes Boylan. His relationship with Molly has been strained since the death of their infant son, Rudy. He experiences subtle social alienation as a Jewish man in Dublin. He brings Molly breakfast in bed while she discusses her upcoming concert tour. She casually mentions a letter from Boylan, deepening Bloom's quiet hurt. Episode 5, Lotus Eaters. Bloom walks through Dublin toward the post office, where he receives a covert letter from Martha Clifford, a woman with whom he conducts a flirtatious correspondence. Their mild affair is an emotional outlet for his marital frustration. He passes a church and contemplates religion, noting its power yet distancing himself from its rituals. Bloom reflects on bodily functions, sensuality, and the human desire for escape, modern lotus eating. He visits a chemist for lotion and then stops by a public bath, where water imagery suggests cleansing and temporary relief from emotional turmoil. Episode 6, Hades. Bloom joins several acquaintances, Martin Cunningham, Jack Power, and Simon Dedalus, Stephen's father, in a carriage headed to the funeral of Paddy Dignam. During the ride, Bloom reflects on death and burial, the fragility of life, his father's suicide, his son Rudy's death, the pettiness of social prejudices. In the cemetery, Bloom observes religious rituals skeptically but respectfully. He moves between humor and philosophical meditation, thinking about decomposition, eternity, and the democratic nature of death. This is Bloom's symbolic visit to the underworld, paralleling Odysseus descending into Hades. Episode 7, Aeolus. Bloom tries to get advertisements published in a newspaper office. Stephen also arrives separately to deliver DC's letter. The episode imitates the noise and bustle of a newsroom, using newspaper headlines to break up the text. Symbolically, Aeolus, god of winds, corresponds to the blustery rhetoric of journalism, words blowing about without leading to action. Bloom's ad proposal receives only lukewarm attention. Stephen shares an anecdote about two women and a sailor, which captivates the office for a moment. Episode 8, Lestrygonians. Bloom walks through the city at lunchtime, observing people eating with almost grotesque appetite. He feels their gluttony is disturbing, revealing his sensitivity to physicality and social behavior. He settles on Davy Byrne's pub and eats a simple meal, a gorgonzola sandwich and burgundy. Along the way, Bloom thinks about Molly and Boylan's impending affair. He reflects on body image and sexuality. He observes the cruelty and carelessness of crowds. He tries to maintain emotional equilibrium despite personal anguish. The episode portrays Bloom as a moral center, navigating a world of potential emotional cannibalism. Episode 9, Scylla and Charybdis. Stephen appears at the National Library, delivering a bold lecture-like argument about Shakespeare's life and plays, especially Hamlet. Stephen claims Shakespeare's works reflect personal emotional histories, specifically, Shakespeare's jealousy, grief over his son Hamnet, and suspicions about his wife. The librarians and intellectuals present respond with both admiration and skepticism. Bloom briefly appears, unseen by Stephen, continuing the theme of their parallel journeys. This episode is a psychological storm, full of rhetorical risk and intellectual whirlpools, matching the Scylla and Charybdis myth. Episode 10, Wandering Rocks. A montage of 19 short vignettes portrays Dublin's citizens. These include priests, merchants, children, beggars, and political leaders. Bloom and Stephen each appear briefly, moving through the city without yet meeting. The episode highlights social interconnectedness, everyday life, the machinery of the city, Joyce constructs a web of movements that mirror the labyrinthine paths of Odysseus. Episode 11, Sirens. Set in the Ormond Hotel bar, this episode is written in a musical style, full of rhythm, repetition, and sound-echoing musical motifs. Bloom listens while barmaids flirt with customers. Professional musicians perform. Blazes Boylan arrives nearby, heading toward Molly. Bloom is tormented by imagining Molly and Boylan's upcoming sexual encounter. Yet he tries to distract himself by writing back to Martha Clifford. This episode centers on temptation and seduction, oral, emotional, and erotic. Episode 12, Cyclops. Bloom enters Barney Kiernan's pub, where a nationalist, belligerent citizen, representing the one-eyed Cyclops, berates him with anti-Semitic insults. Bloom defends universal humanism. Force, hatred, history, all that. That's not life for men and women. Love is the opposite of hatred. The citizen rejects him violently, even throwing a biscuit tin at him as Bloom escapes in a carriage. This episode critiques nationalism, tribalism, and blind ideological rage. Episode 13, Nausicaa. At dusk on Sandymount Strand, Bloom observes Gertie McDowell, a young woman with romantic fantasies shaped by sentimental magazines. Gertie poses alluringly and reveals herself in ways that Bloom voyeuristically interprets. Bloom masturbates discreetly as fireworks explode. Afterward, Bloom feels embarrassed but not ashamed. Moments later Gertie limps away, revealing she has a disability Bloom had not noticed, highlighting themes of idealization versus reality. Episode 14, Oxen of the Sun. Set in the maternity hospital where Mina Purefoy struggles through a prolonged labor, this episode parodies the evolution of English prose, moving through styles from Anglo-Saxon to modern slang. Bloom meets Stephen here among medical students who are drinking and carousing. Bloom worries Stephen will follow a self-destructive path. He feels a paternal instinct toward him, symbolizing Odysseus protecting Telemachus. The birth of Purefoy's baby parallels themes of fertility, generational renewal, and the sacredness of creation. Episode 15, Circe. The longest and most surreal episode, set in Dublin's red light district. Written as a hallucinatory dramatic script, it merges reality with dream visions. Stephen, drunk and restless, enters a brothel. Bloom follows to watch over him. Both experience intense hallucinations. Bloom envisions sexual humiliation, political trials, and confrontations with the ghosts of the past. Stephen sees his dead mother return in a terrifying ghostly apparition. Stephen breaks a lamp in panic. Bloom rescues him from the authorities, symbolically becoming a father figure. This chaotic, nightmarish episode is their passage through darkness before dawn. Part 3, Nostos, Homecoming, Episode 16, Eumaeus. Bloom brings Stephen to a late-night cabman's shelter. They drink coffee and talk with sailors and cab drivers. Both are exhausted, disillusioned, and seeking comfort. Their conversation is full of misunderstandings but also mutual curiosity. Bloom fantasizes about guiding Stephen's future, offering housing, mentorship, companionship. Stephen listens politely but remains non-committal. Episode 17, Ithaca. Written in a catechism-like question-and-answer format, this episode is a scientific, ironically exaggerated breakdown of Bloom and Stephen's night. They walk back to Bloom's house. Bloom makes cocoa, and the two men share a moment of philosophical exchange, discussing science, politics, art, and religion. Stephen declines Bloom's offer to stay the night. They urinate together in the backyard, a symbolic gesture of equality and masculine bonding. After Stephen leaves, Bloom reflects on his life with Molly, his lost son Rudy, his hopes for the future. Bloom goes to bed, joins Molly, and embraces a tentative sense of renewal. Episode 18, Penelope. The novel ends with Molly Bloom's 8-sentence, stream of consciousness soliloquy, a monumental exploration of female sexuality, memory, desire, and life experience. She reflects on her youth in Gibraltar, her attraction to Bloom, her frustrations with his passivity, Her affair with Boylan. Her hopes, disappointments, fears, and pleasures. The monologue concludes with Molly remembering Bloom's marriage proposal on Hoth Head and affirming her deep, complex love. Yes, I said yes, I will, yes. The ending brings emotional closure. Despite infidelity and strain, love endures. Conclusion, overall summary. Ulysses chronicles the psychological, emotional, and physical wanderings of Leopold Bloom and Stephen Dedalus across Dublin in a single day. Joyce blends realism with myth, mundane activities with philosophical depth, and humor with heartbreak. Key themes include identity and belonging, family, loss, and renewal, love, desire, and betrayal, religion, nationalism, and social prejudice, the ordinary as epic, human consciousness as narrative territory. Bloom emerges as a compassionate, humanistic hero. Stephen represents the quest for artistic and personal direction. Molly embodies sensuality, memory, and feminine selfhood. Through their interconnected stories, Joyce transforms the everyday life of Dublin into an epic of modern consciousness, a celebration of the human spirit.
Subscribe to the channel to motivate us to create more useful videos.